Vanderbilt transfer Ven-Allen Lubin is a different type of big man than we're used to at Carolina. Just how will he change the way the Tar Heels play?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea, joined today by our guy, Coach Pat Kilby, and you're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch of the day. A special shout out to all the everydayers joining us and all the Locked On Tar Heels Discord members of that family. So glad you're all here. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Gang, we're carrying on our summer roster preview series where we take a look ahead at the 2024-25 Tar Heels 1 week at a time. We've now made it all the way through the three freshmen. That's Drake Powell, that's Ian Jackson, that's James Brown. We finished off last week the two sophomores. We had Zayden High, and last week we talked to Elliot, Cadeau. Now we move into the juniors. This started as a four-person class. It depleted to a two-person class with Jalen Washington and Seth Trimble, but now it's back to four because you got some Cade Tyson and you got today's person, Ven Allen Luben, and that's where we're going today. So Pat Kilby, as we always do, hit us with that Ven Allen Luben bio blast and his stats from last year.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so Ven Allen is headed into his junior year. Previous schools, he was a freshman at Notre Dame, and then last year, sophomore season at Vanderbilt. He plays the forward position, 6'8", 230 pounds. Jersey number is to be determined. He wore 2 at Vanderbilt and Notre Dame. James Brown will be wearing 2 for Carolina next year, so we're still waiting to see what Ven Allen Luben is going to be rocking in the Carolina blue. Twitter handle, @LubenVen. And then Instagram handle is Ven Luben, _.
That's a lot of punctuation there, Pac.
It is, yeah, definitely. All right, so let's look at the 23-24 stats. 26 games played last year, 26 games started. 28.2 minutes per game, 12.3 points per game, 6.3 rebounds per game, half an assist per game, 1.2 turnovers per game, 1 block, and 0.6 steals per game. Field goal percentage is 50% total, 118 for 236 from the field on 9.1 attempts per game. And then three-point field goal percentage is 33.3%, 13 of 39 from 3 on 1.5 attempts per game. And free throw percentage is 73.2%, 71 of 97 on 3.7 attempts per game.
So, Pac, as we start thinking about Ven Allen Luben, the thing with him is that he is a completely different big than what we're really used to at Carolina. And I think that's true of both the Roy Williams era and the Hubert Davis era. And it's funny because you and I were saying coming into this podcast, we have more questions than answers when it comes to Ven Allen Luben, not because we haven't looked at him or studied him, because until we see what the Tar Heels do this year, how they change, how they adapt, how they update, we're not entirely sure what to expect from the Tar Heels and from how Ven Allen Luben fits into that. Pac, what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I have a lot of questions, and kind of here's the thing about it for me. We had year one of the Hubert Davis era, we had Brady, right? And he was a transfer, and we could tell, oh, well, this is a shift in the era. This is a stretch 4. He's going to just fire it up, and he's going to be able to stretch the floor with the way he shoots the ball, and it worked out great, right? Well, then the second year we got Pete Nance, and love you, Pete, but wasn't the best fit in the world, right? And I know he was battling some back injuries and things of that nature, but still it was kind of a questionable fit at best. And then that brought concerns along for I think me and most of Carolina fans going, okay, well, maybe Brady was a fluke and Pete was just like what we're going to be looking for more consistently. And then this past year we got Harrison. He was awesome, right? He could stretch the floor. He could back people down from the perimeter and create his own shot or create for others. And then this year we're getting Ven Allen Luben, who is different from Harrison or Brady, right? The two success stories in that 4 spot. And so for me, it brings up a lot of questions. And then the other thing in that, you throw in there that we don't have a true dominant 5 like we've had for the last few years. And we go, okay, is he going to be playing more 5 or more 4? Because he is kind of a hybrid type player in that regard. And so when you throw that on top of all the other things I just mentioned, it's like, what in the world can we expect from this guy? And how does the staff expect to use him? Because obviously it's not going to be like an Armando Bacot again. So it's just going to be a lot of question marks and a lot of concerns out there. But the one thing that I am confident about, at least for sure with Ven Allen Luben, is he's very athletic. We know he can face up around the rim, like the 15-foot and in face-up game. He does pretty well. He finishes around the rim well. I mean, he's 50% from the field, which is great. So he's fairly efficient. He's above 70% from the free throw line, and he does appear to rebound well. So he does have a lot of positives working for him. It's just going to be a lot different for Carolina fans to figure out how does this guy fit in because of all the changes.
So that said, Pack, that leads me to ask this question of us. How should Tar Heel fans adjust their expectations of like how Carolina's front court will function, but then also what that means in terms of results and tinkering and guess and check and let's try this combination and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I think where we need to start with that question is if your expectation is to have a back to the basket post player, I think you're going to be surprised because I don't foresee that for this team. And we've talked about it before, Isaac, on like previous episodes of being a lot more 5-out oriented. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to have post players out there. Like they're just going to be on the perimeter a lot, setting ball screens and doing a lot of picking and popping and maybe some horns action stuff. And they're going to be used a lot more as screeners and then letting our guards, because our guards are so talented, play basketball off of that and make reads off of that. And so it's going to be a lot less like rim running and posting up hard and feeding the post like we saw in the Roy Williams era and even saw in the Hubert Davis era with Armando, right? We're not going to have that necessarily anymore. So we need to temper our expectations to our bigs are now going to be ball screeners and poppers, ball screeners and rollers. They're going to be guys that are getting the ball in transition and, trying to rim run, but as soon as they don't get it, out to the perimeter.
No.
And so, those types of things are definitely going to change, which means we need to adjust our expectations for our post players. Can they pick and pop well? Can they be consistently on the catch and shoot? Can they face up and create? They're going to have more space than normal from the perimeter. Can they capitalize on that? And that actually fits Ven Allen Luben well. I think he can capitalize on getting 1 or 2 dribbles in space, making a move, and going to finish. So there's going to be a different style of play come to Chapel Hill for sure. And we just need to be prepared mentally to know it's not going to be like what it was. There's definitely going to be some adjustments.
Okay, so like there's this other side of it, Pack, that because of the high expectations everyone had of bringing in, we like Cliff Omori or Jonas Adu or any of these other bigs that we went after and either not landing them or backing off of them or whatever it was different with that, or, them going back to school, that kind of back to their previous school, any of that kind of stuff. It's no fault of Ven Allen Luben's, but because of the staff not adding any other front court players, there's these like unfair expectations put upon Ven Allen Luben. So what would you encourage, kind of maybe in a similar but slightly different conversation, what we were just talking about, how would you encourage Tar Heel fans to be patient with Ven Allen and the staff as they watch, or to not like scorn him because he's not the guy that they were hoping for?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we've got to be a little bit patient in a similar way to what we were with like Elliot Cadeau last year. Now, totally different scenario, but there were about 10 to 15 games took place before he started to kind of hit his comfortable stride there and looked like he was a part of the team and knew what was going on in the direction we wanted to go. And I think Ven Allen Luben could be a similar situation. Maybe I'm wrong and he hits the ground running right away. I don't know. But I do think there's going to be a little bit of a grace period that needs to be given for him and, like you said, the staff to kind of fill this out. There's going to be a ton of different lineups we can play with, a ton of different things we can do with our front court. So it's going to take some time. But I will say what I've learned from Ven Allen Luben watching on film that I think Carolina's going to really like, fans in particular. It seems like he plays really hard, and he's scrappy and he gets after it, and he rebounds pretty well, which is obviously a staple to Carolina basketball and what we do. So he does have some things that I'm intrigued with and that I find to be positives. And so we kind of need to focus on those things until, that grace period has been given for him to kind of find his footing and his role within the new roster.
And because of all that, it feels like there's a wide potential of outcomes for Ven-Allen Luben's season at North Carolina this year. We're going to talk about that, plus his strengths and weaknesses as we see them, coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about game time, going to MLB games in the summer is one of my favorite all-time things to do. The game, food, people, everything that's part of the experience. And I'm excited to make all new memories this summer at the ballpark. But thankfully, if you're trying to get some last-minute tickets, you don't have to sweat high price gouging, because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, making getting these tickets even faster and easier. In fact, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to game time. With killer last minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. How about this? It's now August. We're looking ahead to the first football game of the year, which happens this month. North Carolina at Minnesota. Was looking ahead to tickets at that game up in Minnesota. $36 up in the upper corner is the cheapest I can find, but the best deal, $73 each, lower sideline, section 144, row 35. Man, if you're going, get in on that deal right now and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off after you create an account. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Tar Heels today. Your team every day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're talking Ven Allen Luben, the Vanderbilt transfer who had been at Notre Dame his first year. And then as Jerry Stackhouse moves on from Vanderbilt, he kind of helped encourage and push Ven Allen to the Tar Heels in some ways. Now, Pat, on last week's player preview, we talked about Elliot Cadeau, and I said, is there a player whose improvement this offseason is more important? I have a similar question for us with Ven Allen Luben. Is there a player on this team who has a wider array of possible outcomes with this season because of skill set, because of role, because of whatever it is? It feels to me like Ven Allen's possibilities for the 2024-25 season are vast. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. They're vast in a lot of ways. People's expectations, are vastly different. So how he could fulfill those, could go a lot of different ways. The expectations for the role he might play are vastly different. Like for me, I could see him being our starting five, or I could see him being our starting four. I could see him being somebody that plays a role off the bench. Like, it could go a million different ways. And it just, there's just so much that we don't know, right? There's just so many questions that we have that we won't know until we start playing games. But obviously he's got some tools and some intangibles that make us have these wide variety of expectations, right? So he's got some good qualities. I don't want you to hear me say that he doesn't.
Right.
It's just that we don't know how it's going to fit and where it's going to go. And it's really that way with a lot of them in the front court, right? Like we talked about Zayden, and he could play a bigger role. We haven't mentioned Jalen Withers as much, but we don't know what his role could be. But I do know this, there's going to be a lot of experimenting going on amongst the staff, and it could go in a million different directions. But Ven Allen has got athleticism. He's got rebounding. He's got length. He's got the ability to rim run and run the floor. And so his role could really just vary so much. And so I think you're spot on with the question. I mean, it's a wide margin of things that could happen for him, both as a player, in his role, in our expectations. He just has a lot of things working for him there.
And I think, with what you were saying there, I think a lot of it could even be dependent. You kind of referenced this earlier, but let me say it more definitively now. I think a lot of the answer to this question could be dependent on Jalen Washington's growth. Who is he and how is he functioning? Can they play together in the front court? That could be a key factor in this as well. And I also don't want to assume, Pack, I think we just look at it and think, oh, he's 6'8", and so he can't be a 5. You see what Miami did, not last year, but 2 years ago with Norchad Omier as their starting 5? I mean, that dude's an undersized big, and they were just fine, thank you very much. So it's all going to be about how these pieces fit together and the coaching staff's ability to find those pieces all fitting together well. And so that'll be interesting. Pack, let's get to Ven Allen's strengths and weaknesses. As you think about specific strengths that he brings to the table, what have you got?
Well, the big thing for me with him is, and I've alluded to this a couple times, he's a really good rebounder. He some things that he did at Vanderbilt, I think, will translate well to Carolina as far as his offensive rebounding, necessarily, like his knack for tracking shots and playing that cleanup role and getting some easy buckets around the rim. I love that he shoots the ball pretty well from the free throw line, right? Like he was 73%. So he's going to get plenty of offensive rebounding opportunities in the offense. For Carolina, he's going to be able to get the ball around the rim quite a bit, I think. And so if he can translate that into success at the free throw line like he did at Vanderbilt, then I think that's another strength for him. And then he's got some things, right, that you can't really coach or teach. He's long, he's lanky, he moves pretty well for his size. He's going to be able to guard multiple positions. He's strong, which in a lot of ways, he's not Harrison Ingram at all. I'm not saying he is, but he's kind of like Harrison in that way that he's very chiseled and he's got a good body and he's strong and stout. And so I think he's going to be able to hold his own defensively and guard multiple positions, which is going to be a key for us. I think those are his strengths there.
Yeah, because that defensive versatility that he brings to the table is something that we haven't had with, say, Armando, right? While Mondo certainly grew in that capability, Ven Allen has it much, much more already. You talked about that offensive rebounding. His offensive rebounding percentage was just shy of Armando last year, right? And so there is possibility there. Two other things I'll note that stick out to me. He has a very low turnover percentage for a big. Last year at Vanderbilt, 9.9% on turnover percentage. Contextually, Pack, that would have been tied for second on the Tar Heels last year. The only Tar Heel with a lower turnover percentage was RJ Davis. And Ven Allen's percentage is tied with what Cormac Ryan had last year. You look at other bigs for Carolina last year. Armando Bacot was at 11.8. Jalen Washington, 12.6. Jalen Withers, 16.4. And so that is certainly a plus in my mind, that turnover percentage. And then also you talked some about his body. I love that even though he's 6'8", he's got over a 7-foot wingspan, which allows him to play quote unquote bigger than that 6'8" frame would suggest that he can. And I think that's going to help in the interior, where although he's versatile, he is kind of more comfortable as kind of a back to the basket basket. Pack, quickly before we move along here, what kind of weaknesses or areas of growth do you see for Ven Allen?
Yeah, I think the big thing for him is, I don't have a ton of things to point out, but I think the big thing is going to be, can he shoot the ball consistently? Especially if we're going to be in a 5-out and we're going to be setting a lot of ball screens and playing off of that. Like, he's going to have some opportunity, I would imagine, to pick and pop. And the more he can do that consistently, the better it is for everybody else because it spaces the floor adequately. And so for me, that's a question mark right now.
Yeah.
Can he command defense's presence from the perimeter will be the question mark.
And part of that, we talked about this last week with Elliot Cadeau, is the sample size on shooting. He had a higher percentage than Elliot last year, but with even fewer shot attempts. He was exactly 33% from three, but on only 39 attempts. So he made 13 of them, but we're going to have to see what that looks like as the volume probably increases in the Hubert Davis system, where we're looking at him taking more shots. All right. Coming up, we're going to get to our Coach Davis preview. What are 3 specific things that Coach Pat Kilby Davis would want Ven Allen Luben to be working on this offseason? What do we expect his role in minutes to be, specifically if we had to put something to it, and some bold predictions for Ven Allen Luben? All of that coming up in just a second. Coach Pat Kilby, I want you to take off your Coach Pat Kilby hat and put on your Coach Hubert Davis hat, and we're going to conduct an end of season meeting with Ven Allen Luben. Ven Allen, here are 3 things I want you to work on this offseason before the 2024-25 season kicks in. Let's do it.
First of all, shooting, being that consistent threat from the 3-point line that we talked about, and being prepared for that volume to be higher. More attempts, especially with the spacing that's played. The second thing I would say is, just learning your teammates, learning how they play, especially being a newcomer, figuring out how you can take advantage of their style of play, specifically with the ability that Ven Allen has to offensive rebound. Like, knowing his teammates' games is going to pay dividends for him. And being able to track their shots and how they miss and, different things like that. And so I think that will be important. And then living in the weight room, not necessarily fair, but he's going to be asked to do some things that are not necessarily what we would consider in his wheelhouse. But he's going to have to guard the 5 some, whether Jay Wash turns out to be great or not. Like, he's going to have to do that. He's going to have to play people that are bigger than him. And so living in that weight room, getting stronger, getting faster, getting more mobile, getting more explosive is going to be very critical for him. So if he can focus on those 3 things and really experience growth there, then I think he's going to turn out to be a really nice addition for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, and something that jumps into my mind as you talk about that, Pack, is while we talked about him having greater defensive versatility than Armando Bacot, what he probably doesn't have is Armando, like, the jump Mondo took last year defensively, and we've talked about this, was unbelievable. And so Ven Allen, if he is at the 5 position, has a tall task ahead of him. And so that's something to watch out for. Pack, let's look at what we think Ven Allen's expected role will be. We've talked about the wide array of possibilities, but people are here because they want to hear what our thoughts are. So let's be specific with this. I'll put it to you this way. If you had to say right now, is Ven Allen Luben a day 1 starter for this team? And if not, could he get there by ACC play or the end of the season? Or will he not be a consistent starter for this team? Which of those 4 outcomes do you think is most likely? So
if I had to say, is he a day 1 starter? If you had asked me that in May, my answer may be would be differently now. I think in May I was thinking he would be, and I even came on the show and said I think he'll start at the 5. Now I've kind of changed my tune on that a little bit. The more I've learned, the more I've thought. I definitely think he's going to start some because there's going to be some experimenting that goes on. But I think when all the dust settles, I think he's going to be playing the backup 5 to Jay Wash. And could be dead wrong on that. he could be playing the 5. He could be starting at the 4 for all we know. I do think Carolina is going to go more all in on the smaller lineup and have more of like Cade Tyson at the 4. But I think when all the dust settles, it's going to be Ven Allen Luben playing that backup 5 role and playing some at the 4 too, but primarily filling minutes backing up Jay Wash.
And I think a lot of that with the role, like I remember Jalen Withers last year. You know, we've talked so much about how it really took Jay Witt a long time to figure out what his place was on that team, how he fit in, because he was being asked to do some different things than he was asked to do at Louisville, not shoot as many threes, for example. And I think there were times when Jay Witt figured that out last year, but his inability to figure that out consistently hurt his ability to have a bigger role on the team. I hope I'm not saying anything that's unfair there. I don't think I am. And I think the same is true of Ven Allen Luben this year. And it's incumbent upon both he and on the coaching staff to help him have this defined role and know exactly what they need out of him. If so, then he's going to be more impactful to this team. I'm with you. I do not foresee right now, at least, him being the day one starter. I think part of that is the Hubert Davis typical loyalty towards guys that have been in the system longer. I think some of what you said about just how it seems like things are going to shape up from the roster, I do expect him as well to be coming off the bench, at least at the start, and then we'll see what the tinkering with lineups ends up doing. That said, Pack, what do you think his expected place on the depth chart would be? And I guess I would mean that in terms of like minutes per game or production. Last year at Vanderbilt, he was playing 28 minutes a game. Do you think he'll be there? Do you think he'll be lower? Do you think he'll be higher?
Well, it's going to be I like that you brought up Jalen Withers, because I think that's going to be a very similar comparison. You know, Withers was playing a major role for Louisville when he was there. And then he came to Carolina, admittedly, because he wanted to win and he wanted to be a part of a winning culture and play winning basketball. And like you mentioned, he had to change some things about the way he played in order to do that. And Ven Allen is the same way. You know, he obviously didn't experience a ton of success at Notre Dame or Vanderbilt. So now he's coming to Carolina and he's going to want to play a part of a winning culture and a winning team, but that's going to come with some sacrifices. Yeah. And where I'm going with this is he's going to sacrifice some minutes. He's not playing 28 minutes a game. No. I honestly anticipate being more in the 15-minute per game range. And so and obviously that could be give or take here or there a little bit, and largely depending on matchups and who we're playing. If there's a team with a bigger dominant 5, I could see him maybe not playing as much. But if there's a team that, you know, is a little bit smaller and so we can afford to go smaller, then we could take advantage of that with Ven Allen Luben. So his minutes could vary, but I think it's going to settle on the average of about 15 minutes per game.
I think perhaps the stat to watch for me that is going to most determine his minutes and time on the floor is rebounding. His ability to rebound at a high level is, to me, going to determine how often Ven Allen or how long Ven Allen is out there. So we'll see what happens. Pack, let's wrap this bad boy up with some Ven Allen Luben bold predictions. What do you got?
I think I've really wrestled with this one. But my bold prediction is that Ven Allen Luben is going to average 38% from the three-point line. I think he surprisingly stretch the floor for Carolina and be a nice little fit in our 5-out offense, and find himself, you know, being a really consistent offensive contributor off the bench for Carolina.
Dude, if he's doing that, this offense is going to be otherworldly. I mean, I already feel good about it with the bigs just being those screeners, as you were talking about earlier, but that would be something. Pack, bold prediction again. As we always say, these are things guaranteed to not be right. And so that said, I'm going to predict so last year, 12.3 points a game, 6.3 boards. I'm going to predict for Ven Allen Luben that the points stay the same, 12, but he goes up to 8 boards a game. And if so, again, as I just said, that's how he's going to find playing time. And so similar to Harrison Ingram's rebounding growth last year, I think he's going to realize how important that is. He's going to get after it, and that's going to get him on the court. So give me 12-8 for Ven Allen Luben as my bold prediction. Pack, anything else on this dude before we wrap?
Yeah, I do want to add a quick note to my prediction there. I like that you brought up Harrison Ingram because that's where I was going to go with it. You know, Harrison, his numbers at Stanford weren't great, his three-point shooting, but he hadn't been around. You know, he had been the guy. And kind of Ven Allen Luben has been one of the guys for Vanderbilt. So he's had to kind of force some things, and he's been guarded really well by a team's better players. Well, coming to Carolina, he's going to be at the bottom of that scouting report, right? Like, people's focus is going to be RJ and Cade and Elliot and Ian and Drake. And so the reason I'm projecting an uptick in his three-point percentage is because he's going to be able to get better quality shots than what he's ever gotten before. And I think he's going to capitalize on that.
Yeah, great point. I absolutely love it. All right, guys, that does it for another one of our roster player preview series. We're going to continue with the junior class. Got 3 more of them to do over the course of the next 3 weeks. If you're not subscribed to the show already on audio and video, make sure you do that so that you don't miss a second of Locked On Tar Heels. If you haven't joined our Discord community, man, you are absolutely missing out. Great conversations happening literally daily, even in the offseason. That thing is going off, and so you're going to want to come be part of it. The link is in the show notes, and it's free to join. Come for the Tar Heels, stay for the community. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow, but until then, peace.